the greatest show in fantasy football history, hosted by the incomparable Scott Connor and the one and only Ray GQ, I present to you Destination Chill, where football and fantasy collide.
Good evening, good people. Happy Destination Chill evening. It is Sunday, May 5th, 2024. And we are back in the building a week after the NFL draft. Hopefully my co-host is recovered from the almost 20 hours of live streaming that we did last week. But we're here to talk about this week, some of the narratives, rookie draft takeaways. I see some people in the chat that I have done rookie drafts with, that I have made some trades with this week already. So shout out to everybody in the chat and everybody that joins tonight. But Ray, let's get right into it. Last week after the show, you dropped your early 2025 mock draft, talking a little bit about the class. I've seen a lot of 2025 firsts fly around this week. People getting into this class, people getting out of this class at the right spot. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about some rookie draft takeaways. But first of all, my friend, first time for us doing any live content since the draft stream, other than Wake Up and other than the Sunday Night Destination Chill last week. So how you doing, my friend?
Appreciate you having me in. And GEGP to everybody out there. It feels, when I text you this morning, I was like, hey, man, we got to actually come up with some real content now. The draft's over. We can't keep leeching off of draft reactions and an instant draft take. But I'm doing good, man. And I didn't realize that it happens so quickly after the NFL draft that rookie minicamp takes place to get those rookies in. And you get your first glimpse at them on an NFL field with their team. And while they're not with their starting quarterbacks and everybody's not there, it's just interesting to already watch the reaction take place. And man, one of the things that I've learned and I've really implemented this year, and Scott, you've probably seen it from a distance, but being so close to what we do every day, I've been very relaxed this process. There has not been a lot of reactionary takes from me one way or another. Very level-headed approach and just being a lot more methodical at this point in time. And in years past, I would be so over the moon, over my skis, excited, full of optimism and the magic beans. And this year, I'm just letting things play out a little differently. I think I've learned a lot about this game and how the NFL is starting to operate. And it's just making this process for me a lot nicer. It's just I'm not all crazy right now with the expectations for this class. And it's made for a nice little kind of relaxation period and just kind of watching the market manipulate and maneuver after the draft, man. But yeah, 25 class is exciting, dude. It's exciting. Drop that piece, and there's a lot more talk about the 25 class, Scott, than I thought we'd have at this point in time. Like, why the hell are we talking about this class so much already? It seems way too early. It seems like earlier than years past that we're really into this class now. I don't know what it is, man.
Well, it's funny. You came up with the observation about how you're not all hot takey and willing to put your neck out there for every one of these situations, good, bad, indifferent. And I can definitely notice a change in myself post-draft this year than years past, to where years past I would have had some conviction on every player. I would have been telling people, don't draft this guy, draft this guy. This is who you should be taking in round 3, round 4, your rookie drafts. And this year I consumed a lot more NFL content. And the only thing I've really consumed this week has been NFL people talking about the draft classes. And there's some fantasy mixed in there. You know, I listen to some of my favorite content creators that do talk Dynasty and do talk rookie strategy and stuff like that. But probably 90% of what I've consumed this week is NFL people talking about how good these teams did or maybe how bad these teams did. Now, it doesn't mean they're right, but a lot of little nuggets that I've then incorporated into my takes on some of these rookies, my takes on team building going forward for teams. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about those in terms of how that syncs with what the Dynasty people are saying. Because it's interesting. You feel some NFL people talk about some receivers in this class, for instance, and you're going, wait a second, that doesn't line up with what these people over here are saying. Man, that guy's in a smash spot. That's a first-round pick. Then you have NFL people over here going, I don't know if that's really going to work, or that was a reach, or maybe that was a mistake. That really wasn't the greatest fit based on X, Y, and Z. So that has kind of shaped my takes a little bit this year. But then we're still in the midst of rookie draft season. It's excitement. Everybody is painting pictures. Now, I don't want to take away from any of that stuff when it comes to dynasty analysis.
Right.
So that's where I want to start tonight, getting into 2025. Because even if you, and I'll just give everybody an example so you know what I'm talking about. Ricky Pearsall. A lot of people have Ricky Pearsall takes. Man, like, he's in a situation right now where you would agree he's probably blocked from having a significant role this year. You'd agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
If things stand as they stand, right?
Yes.
Then you go, okay, well, what role does he play on the offense? And some interesting takes from people saying that this really isn't a role that this offense has ever had before. So just to say he's replacing Brandon Ayuk or he's replacing Deebo Samuel, I heard a really good breakdown today where they talked about how Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are very unique players. Meaning when one leaves, you don't just fill in another guy and it plays the exact role. Like, they do things that is hard to find, and Ricky Pearsall probably isn't either one. And then you have analytical people saying, man, he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie, right? If he doesn't do anything as a 24-year-old rookie, that's putting him in a bucket where you're not really expecting a ton down the road, where you're kind of hoping, okay, hopefully he just rides the San Fran system to some positive ADV, which would happen if a trade comes down the pike later. But then you start looking at that and you go, that's a guy everybody's saying, could go in the late first of a rookie draft. And that would be totally, totally out of character from years past. But we're buying into the Kool-Aid this year. So just that example. But let's talk some 2025. Where do you want to start? Like, what's a good intro to it, other than go back and watch Ray's video from last week, the early 2025 look and mock?
I think when we're trying to relate this to what's happening now and to keep it more so of a current topical discussion about the 25 class, more so in relation to 24, it's, if I ask you where was the strength of the 24 class, Scott, you and everybody in the comment section would say the wide receiver position. That was the strong area, the strong position, and the weak spot was the running back class. I think starting at a holistic view of where 25 sets up, I believe the two strong positions, and this may shock some people, will be the quarterback position and the running back position. The reason why I think it's the quarterback position is because you can look across the industry right now, and you'll probably see a smattering of about 3 or 4 names as the QB1. You'll see Carson Beck, you'll see Shedeur Sanders, you'll see Jalen Milroe in the conversation, and then normally you'll see a dark horse candidate, whether that be Garrett Nussmeier, whether that be Riley Leonard. You will see about 4 names as the consensus sort of, talked about players as the top-rated quarterback. By that stretch alone, regardless if you think the class is good or not, the fact that we're talking about 4 guys being the QB1 lets me know that there will be a conversation when we get to that point. And then, man, the running back position, I really don't need to go into that. I do believe that there will be a revival of that position in Dynasty and in the NFL. And it's not so much just the fact that the 25 RBs are so much better than what we just saw. It's the fact that some of the current NFL veterans are still going to remain in that lead role because the 24 class was not good. So James Conner at damn near 30 years old should be a lead back. You saw Dallas bring back Ezekiel Elliott, which just speaks to the lack of quality at the running back position. We saw that through free agency, the NFL draft. But come 2025, once those boys come out, man, I've said it multiple times, Scott. I believe the RB 6 or 7 in 2025 would have been the RB 1 in this class, and it wouldn't have been close. It would have been Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, nor Blake Corum. Whoever the RB 6 in 25 is would have been the RB 1 in 2024. I think the strength is going to be quarterback and running back.
Yeah, which is interesting because we're coming off of a class where 6 quarterbacks are drafted in the top, let's just say conservatively, top 15 picks of a super flex draft this year. 6 in the top 12 of the first round of the NFL draft. And then you go, okay, this receiver class. You mentioned this is the strong quarterback and receiver class. But was this really a receiver class? Or was this, or a strong receiver class? Or was this more of there were 2 things that happened. There were a lot of receivers. So just high volume, right? But if I told you in Dynasty, man, there's 100 receivers, everybody can have 10 per roster. You'd go, well, that really doesn't matter. Once you get to a certain point, they're not, whether they're on your bench or whether they're on waivers, the wide receiver 100 in most leagues doesn't matter, right? It's kind of the same in the NFL. You get to a saturation point where, yeah, there was a lot of receivers that this year are probably going to crack top 4 options on their team, top 5. but definitely top 4, maybe even top 3. But when you start getting into fantasy relevant receivers, I think this year's receiver class was a product of the COVID rules and all of that, kind of a good class of a lot of guys coming together. But ultimately, I think it was a product mostly, Ray, of the NFL is just drafting and valuing more receivers, maybe not always better ones, but more receivers, which has created 2 things. We're starting to see the targets outside of the elite guys, the same top 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that are drawing elite target shares, right? Everything else is getting spread out, which is creating this there's a ton of these average receivers that have different roles. A lot of them are maybe one-dimensional or two-dimensional, and every team's got to have at least 2 of them behind their primary guy. If you have a primary guy, you're still trying to fill in with 2 or 3 guys behind that where you could go, you know what, if we had to give this guy 20% of our passing targets, we could get by. But that doesn't mean that is a good dynasty pick. That doesn't mean that is a good investment pick. So I think this product of this class is more of, we came into it with just everyone was scared of most quarterbacks unless they were the high-end ones. Everyone's terrified of running backs. So it's almost like by default, we're just going to value receivers higher. But I think at some point the dam is going to break. And I think this class is going to have that happen. So I wonder next year, Ray, do we get more receivers in next year's class that we think could be above the range of the tier 2 receivers this year? Meaning, is there a chance we get 4 or 5 receivers where you go, man, that 5th receiver next year might even be better than the wide receiver 5 or 6 this year, even though we would have considered this a better class? But I don't know if the market's going to consider the same thing, because I do think we're going to start treating receivers differently after this year, because there's going to be guys that hit from all over the place. And there's going to be guys from this year that bust from all over the place.
Well, I'm not about to let you or anybody else get away with that shit now, because it was a great wide receiver class until the wide receivers hit spots that people didn't like. Fuck that. I'm not. No, I know. No. Because what you're saying is 100% correct, and I've talked about this on the Hot Takes and Trending Topics episode. I am in agreement with you. I concur. There is a wide receiver bubble, and I do believe that what we saw this year, whereas in years past, you say there's a wide receiver drafted in the 1st round, Scott, by the Niners, by the Jaguars, by the Kansas City Chiefs, that receiver is immediately thought of and viewed as at least being in the range to be an elite difference maker immediately, like 1st round receiver in a Kyle Shanahan offense and an Andy Reid offense paired to Trevor Lawrence, whatever the case may be. Hell, even tied to the number 1 overall pick. But I have been saying, dude, that I believe that more that you're seeing now, NFL teams, there are some receivers that are 100% drafted to come in and be 100+ target guy from day one. Hell, Devontae Smith was that in 2021. The expectation for him from day one was to be that team's number 1 leading receiver, which he accomplished that and did that. But he wasn't an A.J. Brown caliber receiver. So I think that you're going to see more NFL teams draft receivers, hell, even in the 1st round, Ladd McConkey range, not to be a replacement to Stephon Diggs, not to be Keenan Allen, but to be a viable part of the offense that help contribute. And if you end up becoming an all-pro player, then that's icing on top of the cake. But I do believe that there's going to become a time where JSN was just drafted to be the complement to DK Metcalf and another part of an offense that has a Tyler Lockett type guy, and not so much as you're drafted to come in and be a 150 target guy. I'm in agreement with you, man. And to say the class is bad, or was it a little overrated? I'm not going there. I'm not about to. No, it wasn't a little overrated, but I think the reality of everybody's not coming in to smash spots from day one, it's just slapping people in the fucking face. And I've been saying for the only 2 that I am projecting to come in and to command it from day one are Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. And both of those 2 guys are valued very highly in Dynasty, and both of those 2 guys are being drafted as top 24 picks in seasonal leagues according to Underdog ADP. Other than that, you are drafted to be a complement. Yes, Romo Dunze included is drafted to be a complement to what they already have for the 2024 season, which is DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, and company. It's managing expectations, man. It has been managing expectations from day one. So to say the class is weak, bullshit. Man, you've got guys that have an opportunity to go get it. Do we project it to happen? Do we predict it to happen? You may or may not buy into Leggett and his profile for a variety of reasons, but there will be an opportunity for them to do it. Do we have that belief? Probably not. But we're not about to sit back and now today say the class is not as strong as I thought it was. Like, come on, man. Can't have your cake and eat it too every single time.
Got over 1,100 in here. Hit the like, hit the subscribe.
That's right. Do that.
I was just sitting here listening to you saying that. And I remember talking about this a month ago when we had Rich Rebar on Trades in 5. And I had just kind of started thinking through this. And I think on that stream, I didn't come across saying it exactly the way that you kind of just laid it out. But it really is, from an NFL perspective, somebody said it in the chat. Put that comment up there from James Gerard. A good comment. He said, not a bubble. It's a sign of increasing cap going to wide receivers. I mean, Ray, we've seen some expensive-ass receiver contracts in the last 2 weeks, right? I mean, you know, even the second receivers on teams are going to be going, man, 25 mil plus. You know, look at Devontae Smith's contract. Look at Michael Pittman's contract. Those guys easily could be wide receiver 2s on teams, right? But it's hard when you're paying them that much money. So I think that comment is kind of correct. But I'm sitting here looking at these rookie drafts and kind of looking at what does that mean for next year. I'll tell you what, one takeaway for me, Ray, is when I've gotten to that range where, you know, Drake May's gone, Brock Bowers is gone, J.J. McCarthy is gone, I'm sitting there staring at Brian Thomas, staring at Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Leggett, whoever it is that you like between wide receiver 4 and 12, truthfully. You can pick your poison, right? Keon Coleman's in there, like Jalen Polk. Pick who you want. But I'm sitting here going like, all right, is the best use of my pick, especially, and I know you play in a lot of best ball, I feel more comfortable picking these guys in best ball. Because I'm like, you know what? If they're a 900-yard complimentary receiver on an average offense, the pick isn't going to kill me. You know what I mean? It'll be useful. It'll be helpful. But even in some of those where I'm sitting here going, man, is this Ladd McConkey the best use of this 110, this 111 pick? You know, I know everybody's excited. I know you think, okay, Ladd McConkey, Ray, could be the next Cooper Kupp. He could be the next Amon-Ra St. Brown. That is what everybody views with these guys. They hear the ceiling comp and they go, man, I'm going to feel like an asshole if I trade away all those picks and I don't get any Keon Coleman shares. And he's the next Josh Allen super stud receiver, and I didn't have any shares, right?
Right.
How many of those are actually going to work out that way, though? To where you are so upset that you did not get any Xavier Leggett that it is just you're kicking yourself. You know, where I'm sitting here going, man, you know, everything you've told me, not just the class, but I think also the renaissance of what could be coming from the running back position too, where what if we get to a point where running back is so devalued and it is so dominated by the players in this league that are 28, 29, 30 years old that next year, if we have the promise, and it's coming, of 4 more Travis Etiennes or Jahmyr Gibbses, you know, guys where you're like, man, if that guy goes in the top 40, he's Breece Hall. He's Jahmyr Gibbs. You know, if you're telling me there's 4 or 5 of those, I think the starvation for that on a lot of these teams that have just been punting and fading running back for years, they're still relying on Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon. You know what I mean? The starvation for those guys next year, along with the positional value in Dynasty, is going to flip to where you may say this is a weak receiver class and receivers are what dominates the market and the QBs are iffy, but I'm kind of willing to make those bets. So the takeaway is I have drafted very little of these receivers. I've gotten, you know, 1 or 2 of each where I can, but like I have not taken any convicted stance on any of the receivers. Hell, we talked about it last week. You know what receivers I'm getting a ton of? Javon Baker, Roman Wilson, Jermaine Burton, because they're going around later than the guys we're talking about. And I'm sitting there going, is the range of outcomes really that big of difference? But if I'm picking at 111, we talked about it this morning, man. I'm hitting Michael Penix in every draft.
Yep.
If I can get out of this for a 25 first, hell, even if I have to add a third to get out of it for a 25 first, let me start collecting those. But that's where I've gravitated towards through a week. I'm sitting on 7 Michael Penix shares already. I would have laughed if you had told me 2 weeks ago I'd have 7 Michael Penix shares. Now, I didn't know he's going to go in the top 10, but like you're a guy that may not even start for 2 years, and I'm just smashing him wherever because it just feels like I'm going to have a better opportunity down the road to turn the 25 first into something people want or the Michael Penix share into something else more than what I'm getting if I'm drafting Ladd McConkey or Keon Coleman.
I guess, Scott, I hate to sound like a broken record, but everything that you're discussing, everything that we're talking about, it's just managing the expectation that you have for these guys, man. Mm-hmm. You don't believe it's funny how the further removed you get from the draft and you start to look at different situations, you're just willing to make the bet that, and I'm sure you're going to take your share of Ladd McConkey's. You'll have a few Xavier Legette's because you will have a few. You take a few, I guess. Sometimes you got no other choice, but you're not making the bet that any of these guys are true difference makers, Scott. And if you look at the rookie war historically, dating back to 2019, JB sent us some stuff. It's in the database in our community, like how it looks historically is those guys aren't true difference makers year over year. So I've sat back and I've watched, and what's going to be unfair is if Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Polk, Roman Wilson, whomever it may be, have Tyler Boyd level careers, solid receivers, help their team win. Like that is going to be viewed as a failure based on how people are thinking and talking about some of these guys right now. That will be a down. That will not be good. If that is what Ladd McConkey becomes, that's a failure of an outcome for a lot of people. Whereas I sit back and say that's a pretty goddamn good career for a player who was never viewed as that light during his entire collegiate career. I was drafted in the second round by the Chargers, but it's really just managing that expectation. I've continued to say that, and it's helped make this, for me at least personally, Scott, be a very sort of peaceful rookie process. I take the players that I have the conviction on. I think you make a great point about Michael Penix. If you can't get a 25 first, I think Michael Penix is just as good as a 25 first. And I think it was Alan Sawalski said it the other day, Scott. He said, Michael Penix, the beautiful thing about his dynasty value is if he does nothing this year, he loses no dynasty value. I mean, he's just, no matter what happens outside him getting on the field and flaming, he's pretty insulated from a dynasty perspective, especially going into 2025.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, going into 2025, how do you view, I mean, we've given our thoughts on the running back landscape and how, I mean, I'm looking through my teams, man. Every time we complete one of these rookie drafts, I go look at my team, see who I need to cut, et cetera. You know, just kind of trim up the roster, start managing the roster back to the way that I want. But I'll be damned. I don't have a lot of the elite running backs across my teams. You know, it's very expensive. And it almost feel like the price to go get a Breece Hall or a Bijan at this point.
Oh, man, it's high.
Times it disrupts what you've built for a couple years, and you're kind of like, man, not that I want to bet against those guys, but at the price they're going to cost me, it almost feels like I have to be betting against them in most cases this year. But that also makes me gravitate more towards I got to be on those rosters where I look and I go, okay, my running backs are Gus Edwards, James Conner, and Isaiah Pacheco. I feel good about that for this year. But there's a lot that could happen between now and then where I go, all right, next year, do I even have a running back? There's a chance I might not.
Exactly.
But that's the one where I have to be very disciplined on going, okay, I don't want to go invest in what somebody in the league is going to want for even the second tier guys like Jonathan Taylor or Travis Etienne. To me, that's still not worth it. But that makes me be really, really cognizant in those leagues, especially ones where running back matters, where it's point per carry. Like I almost want to go finding reasons to go the other way and truly lean into, all right, I may not get all of the good running backs next year, but I certainly want to maximize my chance of being in position to get at least one. I don't need 2 stud running backs, right? But if there's going to be maybe 3 or 4 available in next year's class, how do you feel about taking those rosters, especially ones where you were able to just draft a couple of these receivers in the second this year, taking your first, moving it for a future pick, and then doubling down and making the bet on, let's say I grabbed Roman Wilson and Jermaine Burton. Okay. does that give me a little flexibility to now go take a Zay Flowers and liquidate him for another first next year? And just bet that one of those guys can get close to approximating the spot that I already slotted Zay Flowers in. I talked about that on Destination Dynasty coming out tomorrow, where you kind of get to too many receivers like that, and you go, man, if I'm trying to stack first, it might be ahead of the game moving some of these kind of mid-tier receivers for future first and banking them later.
I'll just say this. Here's the only caution that I have is, even in that scenario, the real bet that you're placing isn't on what you can turn Zay Flowers into. It's you are betting that Roman Wilson and Jermaine Burton are actually usable, which I think there's just as good as of an outcome that neither of those guys really do much of anything. And then at that point, you've lost the deal, you've lost the value, whatever the case may be. You're really still, it's not just a matter of pivoting out of one of those picks and getting another two. It's making sure that the two that you bet on at least give you the highest probable outcome of achieving what your desired result is, which is not Burton or Roman Wilson becoming Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it's Burton and Wilson not flaming out. And the accumulation of points that you get from them and what you can inevitably turn the other thing into, you kind of compound interest that way. So I think in this example, I do like the situation that Roman Wilson and both Jermaine Burton fell into. And I think there are other players that you could slot in there as examples, but just in this specific example, I do like both those two players, the situations that they landed in, and I do believe that they will be contributors for their NFL team. At what level? Don't ask me the ceiling or anything like that. The expectation ain't high, but they will be contributors, I believe.
So how have you navigated this year in drafts? How have you navigated? It's appealing to get some of those receivers that win on day two, that win in spots that you like, especially ones that I think I could sell based on some ADV. We talked about that last week's show, man. Troy Franklin went in the 4th round.
Yeah.
I know he went in the 4th round, but there's some ADV there. There's a world where I can write you a narrative where people go, Troy Franklin's going to be pretty good. I want him. If he pops, I'm willing to give you 2 seconds, and you paid the 301. Jermaine Burton, same thing. We laid that out last week on where some of the ADV lies with some of these receivers. How have you played the 2nd round of these drafts? I want to hear it from a best ball perspective too, because in lineup's easy. Lineup is very much if you don't need a receiver or you don't have a receiver slotted in as this is a clear like threshold guy that I know I can start, it's easy to just pivot to the any running back on a 53. Give me Ray Davis, give me Marshawn Lloyd. I'll take those guys over the 2nd and 3rd tier receivers in a lot of cases because of my roster construction. But best ball, how have you played man, I don't know if Marshawn Lloyd's going to have a role right away. I don't know if Jalen Wright's going to have a role right away. Blake Corum. But even the guys below that, Bucky Irving, Ray Davis, how have you played those guys in best ball? Because I think all I heard this week was, man, Bucky Irving, I don't know if he's going to ever be able to unseat Rashad White, and then they're going to draft another running back next year. And I'm like, dude, that is the total wrong analysis that you should ever be looking at Bucky Irving through that lens of he's not going to unseat the current starter and push away any future competition. You know what I mean? But that's the analysis that you hear. So how have you handled that range of running back range where it's all just – I hope they get on the field, guys?
Here's the thing, man. Like, I'm going to kick this back to you, Scott. It's time to get the audience involved, man. So get at us in the chat. It goes back to the original point about the class. We talked about the receivers. The whole freaking class was awesome. Here's why. Everybody out there is excited about every damn last one of these guys. I'm looking at my rankings right now, and I'm literally down at player like 49. Dylan Lobb, Anais Smith, Tyrone Tracy, you got fucking people pumping them up right now.
Oh, yeah.
Malik Washington,
especially.
Isaac Garindo, Kamani Vidal, Bucky Irving, all of them. Marshawn Lloyd. I saw one today, Scott Connor. I shit you not. It's a Sunday. I ain't gonna lie to you, brother. The best running back in the Green Bay backfield is Marshawn Lloyd. The Packers just don't know it yet. This is why the class is phenomenal. Scott, I'm drafting them all. I can sell you on damn near every player that I have ranked inside of my top 45, every last one of them. I can sell you an easy story and an easy narrative as to why somebody will buy Kamani Vidal, Isaac Guerrero, Theo Johnson, Troy Franklin, Bucky Irvin, Javon Baker, Ray Davis, Jalen McMillan. He's taking over for Trey Palmer. Wheels up. I can sell you a story on it. Wasn't somebody today, I saw somebody that shit. I saw it today, man. I mean, they really went out on a limb saying that Jalen Wright would be productive this year, and then next year, I'm so fucking good at what I do. Not only is he going to be productive this year, he's going to get more carries than Achane next year. I'm just before this season even hits, I'm just giving you what's going to happen in 25. This is why the class is beautiful, dog. You got people out here pumping up every last one of these cats, Scott. At damn seventh round almost, Mr. Irrelevant Brendan Rice. You got some loudmouth named Ray pumping him up, talking about there's a shot that Brendan Rice is going to make an impact in LAC. Why the class is awesome. You could sell beans on every last one of these guys, man. So how am I treating them, Scott? Ultimately, the real strategy is if there are ways for me to move down, move out, trade some of those picks. I mean, I've seen people be able to buy a Penix on the clock for some of these second and third round running backs, tacking on a future second. I mean, I'm just drafting them and I'm playing them, and I don't just say this to say it. I don't say it because it's cool to say on the show. You know how I operate and you know how I play. The moment something happens where Troy Franklin gets some buzz and he's on my roster, he will be aggressively shopped. He won't never hit a block, but he will get moved. I will be the aggressor in sending out offers to liquidate the Kamani Vidals, the Isaac Guerrendos, every last one of them, man. Every last damn one of them.
Yeah, that's a really good point on Troy Franklin, because we see this a lot with receivers. In this receiver market, any of these receivers you drafted, hell, you can get down to the Luke McCaffrey and Jalen McMillan range, where people are still excited when they get those guys in the mid-third. You know, they're going, man, I know it's wide receiver 17 off the board, but I can see the world where Luke McCaffrey is starting. And I can see it. I can see the world where he is starting. But that means there's going to be a window between now and probably preseason. You're going to probably know where most people stand with these guys entering week one. Like, you're going to know if there is a ton of steam where Luke McCaffrey is going to be starting. Or you're going to know if there's a couple of these guys where we get to preseason, we get to training camp, and it's, well, Javon Baker is still working with the third team, and he's hoping to unseat KJ Osborne at some point this year. You know, like you're going to hear some players like that where we've already penciled them in because we look at the depth chart and go, there's no way Javon Baker doesn't start. Then we get to week one, and he's the fifth receiver on the Patriots, and we're going, okay, what's going on? This isn't what I thought. Like, there's going to be some situations like that. But with the receivers, the ones that I've taken the most of, I'm going to have to be disciplined. Like you said, when there is a buzz that Roman Wilson is uncoverable, he's going to be the wide receiver 2 for Pittsburgh. You think Deontay Johnson is good, wait till they see Roman Wilson. Wait till you see the athleticism he brings along with the fact that he's already Deontay Johnson. Like, you're going to hear a couple of those, and you have to have the discipline. And it's not, I think this is where people get, so I talked about on Destination Dynasty, comes out tomorrow. People get this expectation, and you've done it too before, and I think there's been times where I've had to go, you know what, I don't know if that's feasible. Know your league, know your economy, right? But let's say that happens. Let's say Roman Wilson is uncoverable in training camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the number 2 receiver, right? Russell Wilson's looking good because he's usually looking good when there's no pass rush or anything.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
He looks his best then. He looks great.
Right. Same with Justin Fields, man. They have a quarterback problem. 2 good quarterbacks there.
Yeah.
So the expectation is going to be, okay, I got Roman Wilson at the 211 in my rookie draft. But I can't get a first. My league is a little too smart. They're not going to get me a first. So how do you play it? Because you've always said you got to mask stuff to get stuff done. It isn't just going to be, oh, Roman Wilson's getting some buzz. Any first gets him. That's a lot of times you're going to go on deaf ears, right? I'm not paying a first for that guy. Yeah. That's too rich. You may get your rogue person. Someone in the chat will go, yeah, there's an idiot in my league that'll give me the first for Troy Franklin, right? They have Bo Nix, that they'll give me their first for Troy Franklin. But largely that's not happening. How do you get it done, though? let's just forecast. It doesn't have to be Rome. It can be any one of 12 receivers where you're ecstatic if you're even at the table to potentially get another 25 first. How do you get it done? What does that approach look like in making those deals? You got to package, you got to get creative, but what's going through your brain when I ask that question?
Yeah, the first thing I'm thinking is what kind of team am I dealing with? Am I dealing with the team that's acquiring that Troy Franklin because he's a real rebuilding team? Is this a rebuilding team, a failed contender? Like, I need to know what I'm working with. If you tell me what type of team that I'm working with or that is potentially interested in that, it's quite easy to throw a package together. What kind of team are we talking about?
Probably the team that has Roman Wilson or that's trying to buy a guy like that. They're not completely punting. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting their 25 first on the table, right? Mm-hmm. What they'll probably do is there may be a team in the middle that has already had an injury or two in training camp, or maybe they were relying on a Sam Darnold to start, and it looks like JJ is going to start from day one. So there's just been a little bit of a ding to their team between the hopium they had in May to the ready to set that lineup in week one. You know, they go to click on that lineup button and they go, ooh, I don't know if it's as strong as I was thinking it was. But they think they're a player or two away, and they think they're being savvy by being able to get the Troy Franklin before he blows up. But they're not punting. The punt team isn't coming and trying to give away their first. It's got to be a team that has a plan to try to win, which is usually the team I want to target. The team that's in the middle, the team that goes, man, I'm Troy Franklin away. That's that last starter I need in my third flex that could put me over the top.
So let's help people out here. Do you want the end goal to be a pick? Is the end goal to get a 25 pick? Maybe acquire some capital for later. What's the end goal? Let's help people craft out this.
I think
it's a good exercise.
I think the end goal is probably to get something more liquid. Meaning, sure, do you think DeAndre Hopkins is going to outproduce Troy Franklin? Yeah. He may offer you DeAndre Hopkins and a third for Troy Franklin, right? You may be going, hell yeah, for my production, I'm getting a free third, and I'm getting a guy that I think can produce very well for 2024. Yeah. But you're losing the liquidity there, right? As soon as you take on that third and Hopkins, you're done. Those are stuck on your team. You're not going to go tier up to something better anymore. You've basically tiered down to the point where all you're left is the pebbles in your hand. They're not going to ever become a big boulder anymore. So you have to figure out, like, what do you want? You're not trying to tier off for more points. You're trying to kind of creatively turn this into a better asset. Now, whether you wait for 2025 and make the pick is a different story. But I bet you a 25 first in the chamber midway through the season holds a lot more weight to go make a big deal for sure. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I've got this time stamped, how to trade these day 3, late day 2 receivers for a first rounder. Like, how do you package that up? And the way that you set the scene was Troy Franklin or Roman Wilson. We get through training camp. There's a bunch of buzz out there that these guys are doing well, right? Because you never really know what the outcome is going to be in the season. But the buzz that you hear, running with the ones, uncoverable in camp. Roman Wilson looks like a star. Troy Franklin's going to be better than Jerry Jeudy ever was. Now, the hype is there, right? People are excited, Scott. That middling team that's just a piece away, but you know that team that's always a piece away wants to stay kind of young. They don't want to go buy DeAndre Hopkins. They don't want to go buy Mike Evans. They want to stay in the youthful game, and they want to take that bet. They want to make that bet on Troy Franklin, Javon Baker, Roman Wilson before it happens. So, Scott, can we start the framework of the deal, something along the lines? Let's start simple and work our way to more some complex things, because I think this is an excellent exercise. Could you at least, at that point in time, take your Troy Franklin, package up one of your future second-round picks, and just approach that manager for a 25 first. Very simple. I'm trying to keep it as simple as it is. I'm going to give you this stud breakout player and a second, or maybe it's a third. Maybe we'll go Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin in a third for your first. Maybe that gets declined. Would you be okay with going as far as your second and Roman Wilson and Troy Franklin for a 25 first? Just trying to keep it very simple here, very, very macro level right now.
Yeah, that is definitely a a plausible idea. I actually just sold a Devontae Adams share very similarly to that, where I gave up a second and Devontae Adams and got back Ezekiel Elliott and a first. And the goal was to turn Devontae Adams into something more liquid. I know he's not Roman Wilson or Troy Franklin, but the idea was I first started the negotiations with I'll add a second to this piece to get into the territory of a first. And here's what happens. When you send that offer, what's the other manager doing? If they're interested, they're not going to decline it right away unless they just weren't planning on trading their first. And there are people that will just say, I will not trade my picks. I don't want to pay the dues. I hate losing my first. It's just not getting moved. Okay. But a lot of other people will look at that deal and say, okay, Ray sent me his second. I have to give my first. Now, if I really want that Troy Franklin, what am I going to start talking myself into? Man, that Ray's pick could be that 205. My pick could be the 110.
Yeah, 111.
That's not that big of a gap. Hell, this year 210 or 205 and 110. You would have probably been okay trading back from the 110 to the 205. You know what I mean? You still would have got a player that you wanted. So people will start looking at that, and they start seeing that gap as that's not a round gap. That's a half a round gap. If things go right, that could be a half a round gap. And now I'm the dummy that didn't take the deal, and all I would have given up is the 111, and Ray would have given me the 204. Man, that's a great deal if I can get a free player out of that. Most classes, that's a flat range.
These deals are going done in rookie drafts right now, Scott. Literally the premise of this deal right now is happening right now with people trading up to buy the 111 for a future 25 first, and then you kick in a second somewhere else on top of that. What people are doing this right now in rookie drafts right now.
Now, there's the converse if it goes the other way, and it's what you're hoping as the person that makes this deal is, man, I got the 104 and I traded away the 212. I gave you a piece, but I'm looking at that deal going, okay, that wasn't a round gap. That was a round and a half gap to where the late second became the early to mid first, and I'm laughing to the bank. So that analysis gets done by the person receiving the offer. They're gauging how far away those picks are going to be. If they're far enough away, they're probably going to counter, or they're probably going to decline it and say, it's not enough. That's what I would say is the typical.
Look at this.
So they decline. They decline.
Yeah, Austin 26 GMA sold my 206 for 25 first an hour ago.
Who was the player on the board? Just to tell everybody in the chat, who was the hope?
Make a guess. Make a bet. Make a bet. Who was it? Who was on the who did somebody have to have at 206 that required them to pay a 25 first? I bet you it was Jalen Wright.
I would say Leggett, Keon Coleman, Ricky Pearsall, or the quarterbacks. One of those. Somebody fell. I wonder who it was.
Kukski says Blake Corn. Monkeypox says Benson. Somebody says Penix somehow fell. If Penix somehow fell to the 206, how would you play that, Scott?
I mean, listen, do I want to pay a first to get Michael Penix right now? No. But Penix at 206 is way different than I drafted Ricky Pearsall for a first. You know what I mean? At least you could say that person may be left out neutral in that trade. But if it was Penix, context matters, right? If it was Penix, the only thing I would say about that is if you're
Trey Benson had to have that Trey Benson.
Oh, Trey Benson. Okay.
Trey Benson.
Okay. How many running backs right now in Dynasty are worth firsts?
Come on, man.
5? 6?
There was a point where I couldn't even get a first for Saquon Barkley, dude.
Right.
Nobody wanted to give me a first for Barkley, and they paid it for Trey Benson. Robert said he's fallen in all his drafts. Said Trey Benson. It's interesting, Scott. Again, I have not tweeted a lot. I have not done a lot since the draft. But I have not seen a lot of talk about Trey Benson. And I guess being tethered to an offense that was very promising last year, an offense that gets a 100% healthy Kyler Murray, that just added Marvin Harrison Jr., that finally is going to walk into the season with Trey McBride as the starting tight end, an improved offensive line, and an aging running back, I felt like I would see more enthusiasm and hype for Trey Benson, but it has been the opposite. It's Jalen Wright's going to take over the Miami backfield. Marshawn Lloyd is the best running back in Green Bay. Jonathan Brooks is a top 5 Dynasty running back. I've heard nothing about Trey Benson. It's interesting. It's interesting, man.
Yeah, it's funny. I see people in the chat saying Benson isn't falling past the 2-3, and then people saying he's fallen to the late second. So that is probably league dependent. Now, I think one good thing that you can read from is, let's say Michael Penix did fall to the 206. I probably have to be questioning how the league values QB in that league, right? Like, I kind of wonder, okay, what is the QB market? We would sit here and go, that's a smash. Michael Penix at the 206. But all these people passed him and went to the 206 here in your league. So I bet you that league market is probably not super robust if you go and try to trade a Baker Mayfield or a Jared Goff. You know what I mean? That's probably not the league where you want to just hey, Ray, I got 6 quarterbacks in this league. You can't sell 4 of them for shit. You know what I mean? And at a point, if the market isn't there, you don't want to collect your 6th quarterback when the entire league has said, yeah, we just don't pay first for those guys. Some leagues are like that. So you got to know the market. If they let you do something in the draft, doesn't that kind of speak to maybe a little bit how the league market operates as a whole, like a microcosm?
Yes. Look at this one from Blind. Someone in our home league sold his 26 first for Penix at the 205.
How do you feel about that? Would you give up a 26 for Penix?
Absolutely. Like what? 26 first? Yes. Yes. And I am of the belief that you should be acquiring those, but I'm also of reality land that I can go get I can recoup a 26 first. I can recoup a 26 first at a cost that's not significantly different than, it's not going to make up the delta of what me buying Michael Penix is for. Yes. If I'd give up a damn 25 first for him, yes, I'd pay a 26 first for him.
Now, is that a Michael Penix specific, or is that in this class specific? I'm assuming you are not paying a 26 first to go get Xavier Legette.
No.
So it's got to be the Penix, regardless of what he paid, 205, 201, it doesn't matter. It's the player for the 26.
We're talking, for me, the way that I view him is, despite the fact that most people do not agree with the Atlanta Falcons' decision to draft him at 8, that absolutely doesn't fucking matter. Doesn't matter if you think they should have taken him at 8 or not. They did. They invested in that player. He's going to play. When it happens, I don't think it's going to be as long and extended as they've said. That seemed like a lot of trying to save face. 5 years before he plays. I'm not buying that at all. I'm not buying it at all. I think it happens a lot sooner than that narrative was led on to believe. So if I can't get a 25 first in a traditional way, I mean, it's just so funny that for the entirety of about 2 seasons, Scott, all we have done in fantasy football is hope and pray to whatever God we idolize that the Atlanta Falcons would find a competent quarterback. And there was a point in time where everybody was just fine with Michael Penix being the 8th overall pick to the Atlanta Falcons. There was a point in time where that was the consistent landing spot for Michael Penix, and people were just fine with it until they signed Kirk Cousins. So you can't tell me or sell me that this is a landing spot that is bad, because people were so excited about Zach Robinson and Raheem Morris and Arthur Smith is out of the way. Hell yeah, I want Michael Penix. And hell no, I don't care if he takes a snap this season, because he is going to play. Anybody out there that tells you he's never going to see the field, he's not going to get an opportunity, they're fucking crazy. Batshit crazy. Absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs if you do not believe he's going to get a chance to play over the next 3 to 4 years. Like, stop. Come on, man.
Well, it's funny because in today's Dynasty game where shit moves so quickly, it almost feels a little liberating to be able to draft Michael Penix. And you go, you know what? I'm pretty sure I'm just going to kind of have that asset parked. The league is going to view that asset. Now, there's going to be some people that are going to go, I'm not interested in Penix. And they're probably, behind closed doors, they're probably not going to admit if that changes throughout the process, right? Because let's say Kirk Cousins is going to start. He is going to get the first crack. He's probably going to get the second crack, the third crack. Like, he's going to get a legitimate chance to not just completely have the Falcons with egg on their face because of that contract. But you're going to know, based on the tea leaves, how he looks in preseason, what the beat writers are saying about how he's going about his craft. Like, you're going to see either the narrative on Penix really build up, which means he doesn't need to play for the narrative to build. Because alongside Kirk Cousins going out starting and probably being slightly above average, like he's been his whole career, all it's going to take is, man, that Penix is really learning. He's really impressive, man. The guys really like him. They're excited for him to get in there. He doesn't even have to play. Happened with Trey Lance after his rookie year. Didn't even play. Was valued higher the second year, going into his second season than the first year. So when you think about that in today's Dynasty game where assets get destroyed, not because the players get destroyed, but just because the narrative shifts so quickly. I'm sitting here staring at people taking Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette over Michael Penix. I'm going, Xavier Legette looks bad in the first 2 games. It's over. You know what I mean? He's crawling out of a hole that is already 6 feet under, and the random Dynasty manager in the league is going to go, man, I really wish I had Michael Penix stashed on my bench than have that receiver that just isn't the best receiver in the conference day one. So it feels like in today's game where things move so quickly and people will just be out on certain assets like that, it feels like liberating to draft Michael Penix and just have him, knowing it. Now, does that mean I'm going to have my 12 shares of Michael Penix and ride into 2 years from now going, he's the next Dak Prescott? No. But it almost feels like if you can't get the 25 first, try to get Penix. Trade up a spot to ensure you get Penix rather than just drafting Keon Coleman at 201 because you just got sniped. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get the future first. Get the player that's insulated. That suspended value dip or suspended ADV is very powerful in today's Dynasty game.
Look at this. So he said, y'all are, and there's got to be a little more context here, but Justin says y'all are speaking a language tonight. 204 and 206 for a 25 first is currently sitting in my inbox, except probably. What say you, Scott? Without any damn context here, but what's up, Justin? How you doing, baby?
Yeah, I mean, with no context, we don't know the starters, the format, who's on the board, any of that. I'd typically lean. I'm guessing it is not a 12-team start 14 best ball.
No, it's
give me the multiple
10.
darts. If it's not that, give me the first.
Yes. All right, we're in our 4-minute offense here, Scott. So we're going to be quick, and I'm going to ask you about a couple of players that are in the old news scene right now. Xavier Worthy, did you happen to see the clip of his first rep in Chiefs camp and the discourse following that? And then I also the drop right in the hands, dropped it, and then the report that came out that he's not concerned about playing at 169 pounds. Quickly, talk about Xavier Worthy.
Nothing's really changed. I'm still trying to rack my head around. I've heard some good things about Xavier Worthy. I've heard people that I trust, they're watching the game, say this is a great fit. You know,
I got him at 8.
Do a lot of things.
I got him at 8. I've got him at 8 overall as the wide receiver 4, ahead of Brian Thomas, ahead of Ladd McConkey. I've got him at wide receiver 4.
Don't you feel as long as he's involved early in some capacity that he has a leash that others may not get?
Yes.
A little bit longer than some of these other guys like Ladd. I like Ladd. I think Ladd went to a great landing spot, but like people are expecting Ladd just to be, you know, he's getting 85 to 90 catches this year, right? Like he's just going to be the primary read. He's Cooper Kupp on a bad offense, but wait till they turn good. Like it feels like all of these other guys, if they're not what you expect, they will not have the same grace that somebody like Xavier Worthy will have.
All right, Scott, let me ask you about one Blake Corum. How are we feeling about Blake Corum today opposed to where we were a couple of weeks ago?
Man, this is one I've really come around on. Not that I really wasn't in, but I'm sitting here going, man, how many more times do I have to consider Blake Corum over these receivers that everybody else is obsessively drafting? We've talked about them all night. Legette, Pearsall, Jalen Polk, that tier of receiver where it's like, do I really think about what we're saying here? I've seen Jalen Polk go over Blake Corum in numerous drafts. And why is it? Well, Jalen Polk's probably going to get an opportunity to play right away, right? Tied to a high-end quarterback that was just drafted, I can see the narrative. But if you're telling me Jalen Polk is just he's Jaden Reed. Okay, that's a good outcome. But I'm looking at like what is impactful for my team. I don't give a shit if Blake Corum is blocked by Kyron Williams. I expect him to be to an extent. But you look at Blake Corum and you just go, I'm going to have him on my roster for maybe 2 to 3 years. That's the life cycle of when I really care about a running back. Once they get older than that, if they're still around, good for them. But let's say a 3-year window, man. What is the value of getting 8 games where I can start Blake Corum? 8 games where I feel good about the offense, the matchup, an injury in his backfield. Like, you're telling me that 206 isn't worth that 8 games? Forget about whether Kyron stays around or whether they draft. That is all I'm hearing this week analysis-wise. Well, the Rams may just address running back again next year. Yeah, every team should.
They should.
Every team should draft another running back.
Every team.
But that doesn't change why I'm drafting him. And this is the first year we've seen where people are actually treating running back as it should be, right? These guys are going in the second round, and I'm starting to just go, you know what? All these seconds that I still have remaining, lineup leagues especially, man. Just give me Blake Corum, give me Trey Vincent, give me the running backs there.
I'm doing it in best ball.
11. Yeah,
I'm doing it in best ball. Yeah. I moved today. I moved the 3-pack of Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, and Trey Benson ahead of every single wide receiver that you just named. Leggett, Polk, Roman Wilson, they're coming right off of the board after Penix. I still do have Ladd and Keon Coleman higher than those running backs, but that's simply off of a narrative and just my personal ranks. I feel like the narrative, if Keon does something with Josh Allen, I might be able to liquidate or move him a little bit quicker. The last player I want to ask you about, Scott, is the aforementioned, what are you doing with Marshawn Lloyd? Because I have sat back and chewed on this and chewed on it more. Like when Josh Jacobs is out there, there's no doubt about it. He's the best running back on the field. But he's essentially on a 1-year deal. This is an offense where LaFleur uses multiple running backs. A.J. Dillon nor Josh Jacobs have been a model of health in their careers. I find myself more and more in on Marshawn Lloyd as the days have gone by, man.
Yeah, I think I'm not as high on Lloyd as I am Corum. Corum was drafted a little bit higher, but the draft capital is pretty negligible. I do think the Corum fit is better, and the competition for Corum, for all intents and purposes, is not as strong. If Josh Jacobs is healthy,
oh yeah,
he's going to be the running back that he's one of the few running backs where we've seen it year after year. He can handle as big a workload as anybody in the league. But it's just I'll call it a 1B version of Blake Corum. I like Corum a little bit better.
I don't even know if it's that. I don't even
not a little bit better. It's the same type of situation for why you would draft them.
He's in a good young offense that has an ascending quarterback in any type of, and here's where ADV, where you catch baked in ADV that people don't think about. Josh Jacobs is at that point where people like him, but they don't desire Jacobs. Nobody really wants to go pay anything for Jacobs. So what's happening? They're looking for any glimmer of hope for something to usurp him. Anything that looks better than the thing that's already there, right? Anything, even to a degree, man, people want Keaton Mitchell to come in and be this complement to Derrick Henry. When he's out there, it's going to be a nasty 1-2 combo. Lloyd fits that type of profile as somebody that has that sort of bell cow running back size. He's got the skill set. He's tied to a young quarterback. He does anything there that shows that he could potentially take over the job for Josh Jacobs at some point in time in his career. People will buy into that. It's easy to see the easy street narratives that people will talk themselves into with some of these players. But ultimately, I agree with you. You know, I encourage a lot of times, like especially now, just sit back and just observe what's happening. Look around at what people are saying, what people are doing, what folks are talking about, how high people are pumping players or how negative people are with some of these cats. Sit back and just observe. There's a lot of time between you constructing your roster and needing to score fantasy points to win games. There's still a lot of time in between that process to take place. Like, don't act so quick. Like, I've got people asking me, Scott, Ray, do you want to buy Zach Moss and stuff? I'm ready to, buy your 25 first. I'm like, look, I'm just at this stage of the Dynasty offseason, I've got little interest in selling. I personally have little interest in selling my first. I'm not trying to compete right now. I'm not scoring. I'm not going to win my fantasy championship here in May. It's not going to happen right now, so I want to keep that flexibility until later. What you want to wrap up with, Scott?
I think the takeaway is, we've only been a week removed from the draft. We're still developing, kind of our consensus takes on some of these players. Hell, you just said you moved a group of running backs above receivers.
I know.
That you did the ranks 5 days ago, and you had it the other way around. So even in a week, your immediate reaction has changed, just thinking through more logically, okay, how am I going to use these players? How are they going to be deployed? And also, what are the scarce assets? I think it comes back to scarcity, right? The reason if you do get a just moderately usable Blake Corum, it's not that hard to find an 800-yard receiver. They're all over the place. They're available. You know what I mean? In best ball even, because best ball people are scared to draft running backs. Man, Ray, what if they don't have a role? It's a zero. You know what I mean? At least the receiver's going to have a role. But then you go, it's not that hard to find receivers with roles. They're on, waivers a lot of times. So
yes,
even there, you're kind of like, what is the scarce asset? So have some discipline. You don't always have to make the pick. I am admitting to getting caught up into it sometime, being obsessed with, man, I'd love to grab another share of Jermaine Burton or another Roman Wilson. Then I look up and it's June and I got 10 each. What the hell am I going to do? Now, guess what I got to do? I got to put in extra work to go get those deals we talked about earlier with Troy Franklin. Man, I wish I would have just had the discipline to sell that 211 for a future second. Just because I don't need to make another pick there. I can find something better to do without having to double or triple my work. So have discipline, understand your construction. You don't have to make every pick. You don't have to sit there in front of every draft board and go, man, let me try to trade in, get my guy, throw around a second, throw around a third. Back to one of the original points, and I'll close it with this. To make those deals where you give up a second and a player for a first, or to make those kind of creative deals, what do you got to have, right? Got to have draft picks. You may feel good now that you moved your second and your third to trade into that 301 so you can get Troy Franklin. But you've now removed, it's not that you traded your second and third. There was an opportunity cost that was lost of all of those days between now and the end of the season where somebody may have put a player on the block for a second and you don't have one.
Yep.
And now you're going, damn, I got to go get a second so I can go get someone else with a second just because you had to draft that player. So just think about the opportunity cost of just giving away everything to get into the draft. We're all got our guy. Oh, man, Penix can't fall to that 206. If he does, I'm selling the farm. Okay, but you maybe don't want to sell the farm in a certain league because you made the opportunity cost lost of not having those picks later. It hamstrung me in some leagues. I go to buy something during the season, and guess what? Dynasty and Chills traded away all his seconds for the next 2 years. That sucks. And I go, what
I know.
Oh, yeah, look, I traded up in the draft so I can go up 6 spots to get Tank Bigsby. Yeah, man.
To get that Jalen right. Yeah, I've been
whatever.
there.
Have discipline. You don't have to make every pick. In fact, you're going to probably be happier in certain leagues where you just don't
absolutely
make and you store those picks for later.
All right, we have one super chat from Matt. Said, 2 GOATs. Thanks, you guys. 12-team PPR start 8, 1 QB. I trade the 109. This owner's 25 first, who is tanking 306 and 25 third for the 103, 209, and 210. 12-team start 8, 1 QB. Moving the 109
in
a
start 8. I don't care about the 109. That pick is
103. He's getting the 103. You're getting Malik Neighbors.
He's getting a Dunze or Neighbors, yes. So he's locking in one of those. Now, here would be my question. How excited are you to try to get that Roma Dunze for what he says could be a early 25 first, a team that's tanking? Do you want to give that up? Because I would just say in a start 8, Ray, 1 QB, you get a hammer running back, that means a lot more than a receiver.
If it's that confirmed that 25, if that 25 first is really going to be 101, 102 territory.
Top 4 next year.
Guaranteed top 4.
Would you do it?
Oh, yeah.
So worst case,
I'd rather have the pick.
It could be 1. Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather have the pick because even in that case, the receiver at 104, let's say it went 3 straight running backs and you were left with wide receiver 1, you're still in the same boat. You're literally probably in the same boat that you would be in with Odunze. but the likelihood that's a smash running back, I would take that for sure.
If that's 102, would you do it?
Yes.
If that's Neighbors, would you
If
do
you're
it?
If it's Neighbors, I'd probably take Neighbors. Give me Neighbors. At that point, just give me Neighbors. I could sell him. Like the
So it's
name of Malik Neighbors.
Dunze, where you'd be a
There's
little
a difference.
more lenient.
There's
Okay.
a difference. There's a little bit of a difference in the perception of immediate opportunity and what you can do from a liquidity standpoint right now with Neighbors over Odunze. It's a good question. Good question.
Yep.
Good question. Famous J said, fire show. Thanks. Hit the like button. It doesn't get any better than this. Appreciate y'all tapping in. You heard Scott talking about it at the beginning of the show. Destination Dynasty drops at like 4 a.m. tomorrow, so make sure you check out Scott, and then wake up with Jay Rich and myself at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Got a lot of dope content coming for y'all this week. Appreciate y'all being here for Destination Chill. We'll see y'all next Sunday night.